With everything set now, the gun crew moves back to take positions in slip trenches during firing.
This is the apex of destructive power for a single artillery piece. The United States 280mm howitzer Atomic Annie was first tested at the Nevada test site on May the 25th, 1953. It fired a 365-kilogram fission warhead 10,000 meters, and it detonated 160 meters above the ground. The yield, 15 kilotons. The Soviet Union also had a stockpile of nuclear artillery shells of a greater yield. Both sides have since decommissioned these tactical weapons systems. Artillery has a long and diverse lineage going back through time to the dawn of gunpowder. January the 28th, 1132. Song dynasty general Han Shizong used bamboo cannon to capture the city of Fujian and qualified to be the first recorded user of artillery cannon in battle. The effectiveness of gunpowder and cannon was so great that its technology expanded rapidly throughout Asia and 13th century Europe. Instead of bamboo, lead or cast iron was used. They fired lead shot, iron or stone balls, or sometimes arrows or scrap metal. The earliest of bombards, however, were defensive. Defensive siege cannon were immobile and fixed in their emplacements. These were massive, smooth-bore weapons, constructed from metal rods bound together with hoops like a wine barrel, giving their name to the gun barrel. The cannon rapidly became the armament of choice on land and sea. Naval power was often determined by the number of cannon that could be brought to bear in a broadside assault. There are three main types of cannon or artillery pieces. The mortar is a muzzle-loading device that fires projectiles or rounds on an angle greater than 45 degrees. This enables them to strike targets at higher altitudes or above the firing emplacement and at extreme angles. Second is the howitzer, from the German word Haufen or heap, which usually describes a short-barreled artillery piece on wheels that can fire projectiles at angles greater than a cannon and less than a mortar. The howitzer is the most common form of artillery piece today. And third, the field gun or cannon. It normally has a longer barrel than a howitzer and a lower angle of projection, usually line of sight. The larger types were often fixed in emplacements to guard coastlines or strategic points. They can also be self-propelled, often resembling a tank, but utilized in a completely different way. The mortar derives its name from the apothecary's mortar, which the original strongly resembled. The mortar was a large and heavy bowl made from iron that was loaded with gunpowder and a heavy projectile and fired by use of a hot iron through a vent hole in the side, much like a cannon. The first use of mortars was as defensive fixed emplacements behind castle walls on battlements. Their high angle of fire allowed them to lob projectiles over high walls but close in, defending the battlement approaches. Early mortars were heavy and very difficult to move. One Baron Menno van Cohorn developed a portable mortar that weighed around 82 kilograms, which could easily be moved and provide offensive firepower against fixed emplacements, particularly in 1673 at the Siege of Grave. Extensive use of portable mortars occurred during the American Civil War. The Union Army employed them defensively to protect railheads and their fragile supply lines. The Russo-Japanese War also saw use of the mortar. This was the first modern war to see the extensive use of trenches, and from that early time, the usefulness of the mortar to attack trenches was seen. Leonid Gobiato and General Roman Kondratenko designed the first mortar to fire a Navy shell. By the time of the First World War, smaller one-man mortars had been designed. Again, because of their high angle of fire, they could penetrate deep trenches that conventional artillery could not. Sir Wilfrid Stokes invented his Stokes mortar in 1915. It was one-person, portable, and easy to use. The Germans also developed a series of trench mortars or Minenwerfer. These were rifled mortars with a much lower rate of fire. There are two ways to stabilize the mortar round in flight: with fins at the base of the projectile, or by spinning the round like a rifle bullet. Both have their advantages, but the fin-stabilized smooth-bore mortar is by far the more common. The modern mortar usually consists of three main parts: the barrel, base plate, and a bipod. Calibers of 60 mm to 120 mm are common, and most operate the same way. The mortar is placed in position and adjusted for target, then the mortar round is prepared. Each one has a preset amount of propellant in its base. These are augmented by additional amounts of propellant attached to the base. Depending on the range of the target, the more propellant, the further they can fly. The round is then armed and dropped into the muzzle of the barrel. The round slides down and strikes a fixed firing pin at the base of the tube. The propellant is ignited, and the expanding gases force the round out of the tube at high speed. Larger versions can be electrically operated or may have a firing pin system similar to an artillery piece. There is also the spigot mortar variant. Once again, these are smaller and easily portable. The projectile fits over the solid rod or spigot. Inside the round is the propellant charge that is fired by a built-in trigger mechanism. These are generally quieter to operate than a standard mortar and simpler to manufacture. However, the specialized spigot mortar ammunition is heavier and slightly less effective. Currently, they are not in favor in most arsenals. One example of the silent mortar is the Belgium Fly K spigot, since adopted by the French as the TN8111. Other types and shapes of projectiles were used, including these plum puddings from the trenches of World War I. Three monster mortars were developed with a caliber of 910 mm or 36 inches. Henri-Joseph Péchance built his in 1832. Mallet's mortar was built in London in 1857, and Little David was built in the USA during the Second World War. Only the monster mortar of Péchance saw service at the Battle of Antwerp in 1832. Modern mortars come in a variety of sizes, from the British 51mm light mortar, which has only a barrel and base plate and is manually adjusted for angle, to the French standard 81mm mortar. A larger version is the Soviet 2S4 M1975 Tulpan, a 240mm self-propelled mortar. Mortars can fire a variety of